Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, in the spring, one of the things that I start thinking about right away is pasture management. We want to get the cattle out there as quick as we can, but there's a few things we've got to get in line first to have good production all season. We'll talk about that today.
Well, every spring we get a lot of questions about burn down in front of soybeans. So today we'll get through all the herbicides that you could potentially use on your farm.
Well, those herbicides might come in handy for controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed a little later in the show. We've also got an iron talk today, but first, here's our farm basics.
These days, it can be hard to make the math work in your soybean fields. With the LibertyLink system with Liberty herbicide, it gets easier. A 2+ bushel per acre advantage over Asgrow Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans means at least $18 more an acre for you. Plus, lower system input costs and more complete weed control all adds up to at least $33 more an acre for your farm. That's smart math. Grow smart with BASF.
If you're a non-farmer and you've watched our show for many years, you're probably wondering, how do they keep coming up with these weeds of the week? I mean, these guys must be really terrible at their job because there are more weeds than ever, it seems like. How do weeds keep reproducing and getting past all these defense mechanisms you guys talk about?
Well, if you've ever planted a garden, you know that getting plants to grow when you want to, where you want to, can be a challenge, yet weeds seem to thrive all over the place. But if you look a little closer, you'll notice some weeds like certain environments better than others, and some of it comes down to how they reproduce. For example, let's talk about perennial weeds. One of the big concerns I have with some of the perennial weeds is if they have rhizomes. What rhizomes are is below ground runners that will move across and all of a sudden put up new sprouts. Canada thistle is one of those weeds that I know Brian and I have fought our whole lives. And the big thing to know about Canada thistle is you don't want to do tillage, because if you chop those roots up, now instead of one plant, you may have 100 different plants.
Yep, absolutely. And Darren talked about these rhizomes as below ground runners. There are also some weeds that have above ground runners called stolons. Same type of deal there, though. We don't like chopping up these root systems because even the root systems can have growing points.
Now, on annual weeds, you may say, okay, well, an annual weed, it just has a simple root system, right? Yes, it does. So it doesn't have the rhizomes or the stolons. But annual weeds most often will go to seed. So if they produce that flower and all of a sudden they've got a seed on it, you're too late. Now you've got a whole bunch of seeds that your only way to stop that weed is to pull the weed, bag it up, and probably haul it somewhere to burn or compost, because once those seeds are made, if you just mow it over or something like that, you've just spread the seed everywhere.
Well, the big thing here is you have to keep in mind with plants, they really only have one mission in life, and that's to reproduce. So what we see a lot of times is even if there's a small plant that gets started real late in the season, it still puts a few seeds on. Yeah, it might not have as many seeds as a normal plant would, but it's just trying to reproduce. So that's what we're fighting as farmers all the time. These plants that are just trying to continue on not just their life, but in the future having another generation or two, or unfortunately 100.
Well, that's certainly not all the ways that plants reproduce, but the big thing is just understanding, hey, plants are trying to reproduce. There's a number of ways they can do it. Learn the weeds that you're fighting, whether it's in your lawn or your garden or in a crop field, and make sure you stop them from getting to those reproductive phases.
Well, speaking of weeds, can you identify this week's Weed of the Week?
The Guardian Air Twin Spray Nozzle from Hypro produces a twin spray pattern with air inducted droplets for superior coverage, even in dense canopies. Be effective and efficient with your spray application this season with the Guardian Air Twin. Hypro, helping you spray better.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
Precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a breakthrough seed treatment technology controls nematodes when they attack. Now offering NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
We started utilizing the dual react system this year. You can adjust your speed and it automatically adjusts your sprayer tips. So you can slow down and you aren't building up huge droplets, or you can speed up and you're not throwing a mist that's drifting.
Hypro, helping you spray better.
Today we're going to talk about spring pasture management. We really want to focus on three different things. 1, the use of plant growth hormones. 2, fertility. And then 3, weed control.
Well, weed control, Brian, you say it's number 3, but I think it might be number 1 for a lot of pastures. When you think about getting good grass growth out in that pasture, if you've got weeds, they're very inefficient users of water, of sunlight, and of nutrients. So if you've got a pound of weeds out in your field, you've probably given up 3 pounds of grass, maybe even more depending on the type of weed that you've got. So we've got to get those tough weeds under control. The challenge here is we're often growing in a perennial grass situation, and if you've got something competing with the perennial, very likely it's a biennial or a perennial weed. It could be a certain type of thistle, it could be a variety of different weeds, and there are different choices that you can use to get them under control. Now if it's a long-term pasture, you can use some of the strongest options like Tordon or Milestone, or a product like Chaparral that has Milestone in combination with Ally.
Hey, let's be real specific here, okay? This is exactly what I want you to do. Number 1, keep it super simple. Okay, if all we're after is annual weeds, Distinct is my number 1 choice. If you want to run 2,4-D or dicamba, you certainly can. If thistle is your number 1 problem, you're going to go Milestone. If you say leafy spurge or maybe a few woody species along with leafy spurge, I'm going to go Tordon. And then finally, just some woody species, I'll look at Chaparral. Now Chaparral is a combination of Ally and Milestone.
Well, there are some grass weeds too, Brian, depending on what type of pasture. And here's where it gets a little complex because there are lots of different types of grasses that you have out there. So you may be looking at pastora or something to take out some of these
plateau.
Or plateau, some of these tough grass weeds. Just have to make sure it's on the label to spray safely on the grasses you have in your pasture.
All right, let's change gears and talk about fertility a little bit. The number 1 thing I would tell you is grid or zone sample your pasture. And you might say, what? Grid or zone sample my pasture? I'm not even doing that out in my field. I don't care. This is the absolute right way to do soil fertility. We've got to find out what's happening out there. There's a lot of variability in so many of these pastures. And if you can just get that fertility right, there's no reason why if you follow all these steps when we go from weed control, fertility, plant growth hormones, there's no reason why you can't double your grass production. I'm dead serious. Double your grass production. What does that do for your dollars and cents on your farm? You got to start thinking about grass as your crop. And if you do everything possible to raise a great crop as grass, well, boy, that is a lot more income for your farm. So with fertility, yes, I realize nitrogen is going to be super important, and probably split applying nitrogen is going to be really important, just like we would in lawns. We tell you, hey, maybe even once every month or once every 2 months, you should be out there with some more nitrogen and sulfur. Beyond that, though, let's talk about the non-leachable things. Take a look at phosphorus, potassium, some of the micronutrients. These are all important things for great grass health.
And don't forget about soil pH. I think about just our crop fields and how much our yields have gone up over the last 10 years. And some people say, well, we've got better hybrids, which we do. But look at fertility management and how we're looking at our yield maps and managing different areas out in our field to try to optimize production. The same thing can happen for you in your pastures.
Finally, let's talk about plant growth hormones a little bit. The real big one that I want you to consider is gibberellic acid. For example, there's a product called Rise Up Smart Grass. We've used it on our pastures. We've used it on our silage corn. It is phenomenal. Here's what we're after. We know that in corn or in grass, like your pasture, any type of grass species, it's going to have some gibberellic acid it's going to naturally produce. What that does is it elongates the stem. You're going to have plenty of that when the weather's warm. When you don't have plenty of that is when the weather's cold. So what we want to do is trick the plant into thinking, hey, things are great. Let's elongate that stem. You absolutely will get more tonnage if you properly time a gibberellic acid application. What we're looking for is when the daytime temperature is in that 50 to 65 kind of range. So we're talking early in the spring, you make one application, only it's going to cost you probably $3 to $7, and do the same thing again in the fall. You're going to find you'll have a lot more grass.
Well, there certainly are a lot of things that you can do to improve production on your pasture ground. Hopefully we've given you some ideas today of things you can do like fertility, weed control, and certainly looking at plant growth hormones as well. Well, when we think about weeds to control out at pastures, our weed of the week might be one that you're facing. We'll show you what'll stop it coming up later in the show.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. I think about what kind of farm I'm going to hand over to her. About how I can make it more successful, more sustainable. I talk to other farmers, with agronomists and advisors to help me make better decisions. To figure out what's working for them and how to make it work even better for my farm. Because when you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line. Then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day. Because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
There are a lot of steps to having a perfect season. Don't let your fertilizer plan be the step that trips you up. No matter when you apply fertilizer, no matter how, AgroLiquid has the experts and the products that'll help you move closer to your target and hit the bullseye. AgroLiquid moves you closer to your target.
In 1949, Morton Buildings constructed our first machine storage building to establish our bond with the farming community. Since then, our relationship has grown, and so have our product offerings. From the smallest specialized operation to the largest agricultural enterprise, we understand the needs of your business and continue to evolve to meet industry demands. Plus, when you build a Morton building, you're backed by the strongest warranty in the business. To learn more about the Morton Advantage, visit mortonbuildings.com.
If if you have a cover crop or weeds growing in a field that you're trying to plant soybeans in, you need a good burn down. We're going to talk about some of the options that you have for herbicides that you can use, timings, and also application methods to get the best control.
All right, the first product I want to talk about is the one that I really hate to use, but in some cases you may need to use this. It's Gramoxone. Now, with Gramoxone, the price has kind of gone up and down here in the last few years, so I don't know for sure what you're going to have to spend in terms of total cost for this, but here's what we do know about Gramoxone. Number one, it's the most dangerous product that we handle anymore on the farm. It's just as dangerous as gasoline, so you have to be super careful with this product. If you're going to use it, you want to make sure that you're out there on a nice, warm, sunny day, get great coverage, use a lot of water, and the product can work pretty well.
Gramoxone is a non-selective herbicide that will kill both grasses and broadleaves. It doesn't move down into the root system like Roundup will, so it'll just kind of control the top growth, but it works really quick. You're going to like the speed of control. Just make sure you're using a strong enough rate for the weeds that you're dealing with.
Why did we start by talking about Gramoxone today? It's because we still find a lot of people, unfortunately, using 2,4-D in front of their soybeans. We would absolutely encourage you, do not use any 2,4-D in front of your soybeans. There's way too much risk. We've seen too much crop injury with 2,4-D in front of soybeans. Now, sure, if it's in list beans, if those are approved, then 2,4-D can be used on those beans. But otherwise, no way, no how should you be using 2,4-D in front of beans. Could you do it though, let's say a month in advance? Okay, I'm fine a month in advance. But the label will say, depending on the rate, 7 to 14 days in advance. That's not enough for me. Just think about it early in the season. It's cold. Okay, are we going to break down that herbicide real quickly? No way. It's just not going to happen. You've got too much risk. As farmers, we have enough risk already. I have people complaining to me all the time about commodity prices and weeds and this problem and that problem and everything else. Why add more problems to ourselves? No way. Do not use 2,4-D unless you're at least a month in front of planting.
Well, the big concern with 2,4-D as well, it doesn't control any of the grasses. And yes, broadleaves may be your primary thing that you're after, but grasses are out there too. Why not kill them both at the same time? The same would hold true with dicamba. If you're spraying dicamba ahead of Extend soybeans, that would be fine. But there's a couple things to keep in mind here. If you want dicamba to work well, it needs to be a little warmer. If it's 45 or 50 degrees in the morning, it might be tough for that dicamba to work 100%. So if you want the best performance out of any of these burn down options, wait until you have some good weather.
All right, it's the same thing with Roundup. If you want to use Roundup in the spring, if the nighttime temp's going to be below 50 degrees, we're going to tell you bump that rate by probably 50% if it's still on label. If the nighttime temp is below 32 degrees, you've got to wait and do your burn down later. Now, I already mentioned 2,4-D. I hate it as a burn down product. I also hate Sharpen as a burn down product. And don't get me wrong, I love Sharpen. It's fantastic in front of corn. It is fantastic in front of wheat. Great product. The trouble in front of soybeans is you can't use a high enough rate or you're going to end up with crop injury. And what we want out of our PPO is we want residual for 1 to 2 months. Well, you can't get that out of Sharpen. So instead of Sharpen, use Valor or Authority. The burn down won't be quite as good with Valor or Authority, but the residual is going to be phenomenal compared to Sharpen.
Well, you can heat those products up by adding oil to them and putting ammonium sulfate in, as long as you don't have dicamba in the mix. That would be a good option and a good way to use those pre's in our 3 pre program. The other one, Brian, is Metribuzin. You want to talk about that?
All right, so Metribuzin absolutely is a decent burn down product. When you have that in combination with a PPO like Valor or Authority, that is much, much better than just the PPO by itself. And again, like Darren said, throw in crop oil, throw in ammonium sulfate, you get all that in there, you've got a pretty good burn down. If that's not enough for you, that's where you can go Gramoxone in front of most soybeans, or you certainly could throw in dicamba in front of Extend soybeans.
Another option that you may use in burn down to try and heat things up is AIM. It doesn't have any residual, so you don't have rotational restrictions for the most part here as you're putting this product in, which is great. And we'll also hear some guys talking about a product called Vita, which doesn't have quite the safety complex. We're a little nervous about that one. It's not normally one that we'd be using.
Well, once again, there are a lot of different options out there. Number one thing I tell you, don't use 2,4-D. Number two thing I tell you, don't use Sharpen. Now, sure, you can use both of those if you're way in front of planting, but if you're within a month of planting, I'm not going to use either one of those. I'm going to run with, in front of soybeans, our normal 3 pre program. If you need to spike it up with some AIM or Gramoxone or dicamba in the right situation, go ahead and do that.
Well, all those things would sure help when you're trying to control our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our Weed of the Week is a tough annual grass. It's woolly cupgrass.
It often gets mistaken for green foxtail, and there's a lot of little things that people say, well, look for a wrinkle on the side of the leaf. Well, that can be true of green foxtail too. The biggest difference that you're going to see with woolly cupgrass is it has a huge seed. And with grass plants, the seed will remain attached to the root system. So dig up the woolly cup carefully and look at the seed. If it's a great big monster seed, you know you're dealing with woolly cupgrass.
About 20 years ago, this was one of the worst weed problems we had in our area, in corn and for that matter even in soybeans, but especially in corn. And then Liberty Link came out. And even though Liberty normally is great on broadleaves and kind of weak on grass, for whatever reason, Liberty is fantastic on woolly cup.
Well, the other thing is Roundup Ready corn, because Roundup is awesome on woolly cupgrass too. So you've got a couple great options there, unless you go conventional corn, Brian. If you go conventional corn, you're back to the 1990s.
Darren and I were talking about this earlier today, that you know what, conventional corn, yes, you can certainly do that. Whenever we talk about conventional corn too, you know, when Darren and I were young agronomists, we just called that corn. There were no other choices. It was just that. And I can tell you, woolly cupgrass, that's when it was the worst weed. Because if you go out there with the normal Group 15, Dual, Outlook, Harness, Surpass, Zidua, one of those, it's not going to get your woolly cup. Well, now what are you going to do?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, woolly cupgrass generally emerges a little bit later. It's a warmer season grass. But the other thing is it's got this great big seed, so it's got all kinds of energy. And by then, your pre-emerge herbicide, even if you just applied it at a full rate, it's just not quite strong enough to take that weed out.
But balance is pretty decent on this particular weed.
If you get lots of rain, if you get timely rain, it can be okay. But the other thing is just accent post-emerge, and it's good up to maybe a 1-inch tall, maybe a 2-inch tall woolly cupgrass if you're really lucky.
Yep, so that's probably our number one fear for you if you're going to conventional corn. If you've had a history going back years ago to woolly cup, you still see some around your farm, we would worry for you, and you got to be scouting, like Darren said, so you get that accent sprayed timely.
All right, now let's turn to soybeans. Again, we've got Liberty and Roundup. They're both very effective, and our 3 pre's will work very nicely on woolly cupgrass too. In wheat, we don't normally fight a lot of woolly cupgrass. We would start off with something like Prepare Down, and then over the top you could use something like Everest or Axial for post-emerge control.
Yeah, usually it's not a big problem in wheat because this grass does come up later in the season, like Darren mentioned earlier, and generally speaking, we've got that great crop canopy. So that's probably the biggest thing we would tell you. Any late season weed, have great crop canopy, and you have less of that weed.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's Weed of the Week, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Do you feel like there's never enough time to get everything done before planting? The window for spring work is quick and unforgiving. Give yourself the upper hand with the ProTill High Performance High Speed Disc. More and more farmers agree the ProTill is the right tool for springfield conditions and heavy residue management. Zero maintenance bearings, independent disc technology, oversized pins and bushings allow the ProTill to handle whatever field or conditions you can throw at it. Degelman High Performance Equipment.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
tough, precise, efficient. Strip tillage with the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm. Learn more at soilwarrior.com/agphd.
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a breakthrough seed treatment technology controls nematodes when they attack. Now offering NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high efficiency farming, there's one name to count on. Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
Of all the sprayer cleanout issues, there's one spot on the sprayer that causes problems more frequently than any others. We'll talk about it in today's Iron Talk. For the most part, spray tanks get cleaned out pretty well. Yes, there are problems every year. Sometimes the cleaning methods are insufficient. Overall, though, tanks do get quite a bit of attention. However, the booms are a different story. They often get forgotten about completely, and we've all seen the V-shaped pattern of injury heading into fields where the previous spray solution slowly flushes out of your boom as you begin to spray the next field. That's no fun. The injury that keeps happening all across a field, or the injury that pops up several fields after a change in product or crops, that's the one that really stinks. And where does that problem come from? Here's the #1 thing that almost everyone needs to do better. It's cleaning out the ends of the boom. Nasty, solid junk is often in the ends of the boom. It's there almost every time I open up a spray boom. It's so predictable. Nobody seems to do a great job cleaning there. The crazy thing is, there's an almost 100% effective solution available, and people aren't talking enough about it. Hypro's had a product called Express End Cap. It works great. We've used it. It eliminates the dead ends that lead to herbicide buildup that can be so difficult to clean out well. Express End Cap also greatly increases the reaction time of your spray nozzles to turn on and shut off by eliminating trapped air. Now, there's a new product called Express Flush Valve that replaces the plug at the end of Express End Cap with a simple valve to make the job even easier yet. I would highly recommend that. One way or another, be sure to clean out the spray booms well each time that you're switching products this year. It will very likely save you from an embarrassing and costly spray contamination issue on your farm. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.